Competitive Pokemon is notorious for having tons of teams that are, well, not very interesting. People tend to point to the 2015 format where, at Worlds, 7 of the top 8 players were Japanese and almost every team looked the same. Fast forward to nowadays, and nothing has really changed. The diversity of teams in VGC is something that frustrates a lot of people, but why does it have to be this way? Is this actually a bad thing? Well, let's find out together. To start, we have to understand how VGC formats work. Each format, using Regulation F as an example, allows and doesn't allow certain Pokemon. The current format doesn't allow restricted legendary Pokemon such as Calyrex and Kyogre, but it does allow sub-legendary Pokemon like Urshifu, Raging Bolt, and Ogerpon. So it might be easy to assume that players like to use a team of the 6 strongest Pokemon in the format and call it a day. But it isn't that simple. See, what makes a Pokemon strong isn't necessarily its stats, but rather how it matches up into the field. Whimsicott, for example, has the same base stat total as Komala, and yet it still sees play. Does this mean that the best Pokemon are the ones who match up well into the field regardless of stats? Not quite. When constructing a team, there are a few goals that players have. 2 of the most common ones being to give them the tools to outplay, or to allow them to win on Team Preview. The advantage of having tools is that every matchup is theoretically playable, although these matchups will not necessarily be positive. This archetype is called Balance. The matchup-based teams take a lot of forms, typically Tailwind, Hard Trick Room, and Psyspam. These are typically called Hyper Offense cores. A lot of the time, players with more experience use Balance since it allows them to show off their extensive knowledge of the game and have a consistent answer into most teams. Does this mean that Balance is just better? No, because Balance has an insanely high skill ceiling. Even the best players in the world could still lose to someone new using Balance if the newer player just happens to outplay them. The disadvantage of Hyper Offense is that in exchange for having overwhelmingly positive matchups, you tend to have matchups that are almost impossible to win. Okay, so we understand how players build teams, but why is it that Balance tend to win all the major tournaments? The thing is, most of these big tournaments are either regionals, internationals, or worlds, where the best players from all across the world compete. These tournaments are structured with 8 rounds in Phase 1, and usually 3 to 4 in Phase 2, depending on how many people attend the tournament. In order to advance to Phase 2, you'll have to get a record of 6 wins and 2 losses or better. In order to reach the top cut, the final phase of the tournament, you usually need to be around 10 wins and 2 losses. It's unrealistic to expect Hyper Offense teams to pull enough good matchups to reach top cut, let alone win a tournament, whereas veteran players can pick up any balanced team and outplay their way to Phase 2. So that leaves 2 options for consistency. You either build your own Hyper Offense team, or you use a balanced team. But what happens if you build your own balanced team? Having unique EV spreads can throw off competitors and give you matchup advantages while still allowing you to have the tools required to outplay. This is why, when it comes to bigger tournaments, balance tends to win, and usually in the hands of an already established player. Pokemon like Raging Bolt, Rillaboom, and Incineroar are known to have the widest selection of tools and bulk that allow players to customize them to their own liking, which means we see a lot of the same Pokemon, but the way they operate is quite different. For example, the Incineroar on this team versus the Incineroar on this team operate very differently, with one being used as a damage option holding the Assault Vest, and the other being used as pure support, with the Citrus Berry. Winning a Pokemon tournament is super difficult, even for the pros. So that's why giving yourself the tools and the prep required is key to achieving such a difficult task, even if it comes at the expense of using something cool. Thank you for watching.